Okay, so an ongoing peri-COVID pedagogical response with post-COVID applications. So I would like to start, if I get this thing going the right direction, with this image. So I'm gonna take us back for a minute, and some of you are in this image, right? So this is March of 2020. For those of you that weren't here during that time, this was probably several hours after we realized that we had to evacuate the building, which meant that all of the students were taking all the work they have been doing, getting it together, leaving the building with that, and at the same time, we had been preparing for this. I think all the students have been preparing. We were preparing as faculty. The university was preparing for it, but it was very abstract. It wasn't something that you could really comprehend until it happened. So for many students, this was an extremely emotional time. There were folks that were crying. There were people that were scared. There were people that, students and faculty as well, that didn't know if we'd see each other again in person. Is that mode of teaching gone? Is this something that we're gonna have to reevaluate? And then there were students that were leaving to, this is their college experience, and now they're going home to their family or to apartments, and maybe with sick parents and everything else. So this is where we went. So I'm going to start just from there and move a little bit forward, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of all this. So this was, like I said, the last day of kind of our call. I think we were the last stragglers in the building, I want to say, literally. Not wanting to leave, we were all kind of dragging our feet because we didn't want to face reality. So after leaving, okay, I got it going the right direction. That weekend, I went for a walk in the park in my neighborhood, and all of a sudden, parks became something that were dangerous. We couldn't let our kids play in the parks any longer because there was the fear of things you were going to be touching. There was the fear that you were going to be too close to other kids, and that your children might bring that back into your own household. So this unknown was very impactful on the kind of built environment and spaces that we were inhabiting. Swings were being taken down. And I remember walking through this, and it was so surreal because typically on a weekend this would be just full of all these children playing. Restaurants obviously went out of business or shut down for a while. Hair salons closed down. Have they opened up yet? I need to go get a haircut. And then this architectural wonder right here. So this is my doctor's office. And at some point, it became really apparent that instead of the doctor's office being a place where we went when we didn't feel well and kind of we felt better after we went in there, it became a place that was really scary. So conceptually, at least for me, it was I will stay in my house as sick as I can or go to the hospital. Those were the only two choices. I was not going to go to my doctor to visit her. At some point, obviously, I had to do that, and I can't remember why, but there was some reason I had to go to the doctor, and everything had changed. Before, the reason I was afraid to go in here was because the spaces in that building were small little waiting rooms, small corridors. The exam rooms were really small, so it wasn't a place that I wanted to go. But when I went, that had all shifted. So rather than going into a waiting room, the cars became the waiting room for those of you that have been to the doctor during that time. So your car became your waiting room. You had your temperature taken in your car. It wasn't necessarily into the architecture. And then you were given directions on where to go. In fact, I was walking through hallways by myself, and it would say, go to the 5th door down, and then I would meet my doctor. So our ideas of health and how we stayed healthy started to really shift. And even places like CVS and these kind of stores that were all over where I would never think of going to take care of my health, all of a sudden, that was the place you went. And now we're really comfortable with that. We get our vaccines there, we get swabs, things like that, make sure that we're all healthy. They had drive-through vaccines happening. And going back to this park, the other thing that started to shift, so there's this shift in the uses of places and how comfortable you feel in certain places. The other thing, other shift that happened was that parks became essential. Outside places became essential because we realized that we need to get outside, we need to be healthy, we need to be walking around, we need socialization. We can't just be locked up in a house for days and days and days. So this idea of the park being something that was dangerous, we realized we actually needed to rethink that, and parks were something that were essential. So over the summer and the beginning of the fall, I was working on a competition. It was an international competition, and these are images that students made, similar to you guys in here, thinking about not just a park, not just like an abstract park, but thinking about parks in their neighborhoods or in their villages or in their towns. And so this particular one is an example of a space that hadn't been used for something like 75 years. And these students coming together and saying, we could make this place a healthy place, a place to attract people, a place that we could design all seasons that could be advantageous to the health of society, both mental and physical. And another example that's a little more architectural, like how could architecture start to have these volumes within it that we could inhabit? And even in this particular one, I don't know if this has a laser or not. I assume it does somewhere, but I don't have my glasses on. Okay, there we go. So even like, you know, they had these like little robotic dogs that would say, hey, you're getting too close to this person, you need to get a little bit further away, kind of monitoring where people were within these different spaces. So, and again, these are all international students from different places putting together these competitions. So now I'm going to go to Lincoln, I think, yes. So this, on the slide on the left, that was some of your experience. We would go to the Capitol, we would take photos, we'd make drawings, we'd look at the volumes, we'd look at the details, we'd model those things. And as soon as COVID happened, this was the new reality. Like, this was our reference point. This was one of my students' apartments or dorms, I can't remember which. But obviously, it's not quite as inspiring as the state capitol. So where do we go with that? So what I'm going to do is kind of step back. So this was, I can't remember which semester this was, but I'm going to step back to DMake. And the reason I'm going to do that is because DMake was the first summer, or the first class actually, that was completely online. It was during the summer. It was right after the folks that I showed a minute ago. You know, we were kind of split in that, but they were completely online. So we were reinventing everything. Like I said earlier, thinking about how we were going to approach all this. Although we were prepared, we were never totally prepared because we weren't totally thrown into it. So the first thing we came up against day one, so I'll say, so Nolan Golgert and myself were teaching during the summer. The first thing we came against was everyone was everywhere, and most people hadn't spent a lot of time in the College of Architecture, so they weren't familiar with techniques of cutting and all these other kind of things. So looking at materials, I remember day one, a student saying, hey, I got to drive an hour and a half to 2 hours just to find chipboard or museum board. How do I get something, how am I going to do that? Like, how am I going to drive 2 hours one way and 2 hours back and be successful on a project? And this image is probably already given it away. But looking at different ways of thinking about how projects could be put together and materials that were really accessible. So obviously looking at packaging, graphic packaging, not only is, you know, this is the answer, but what would this bring to the project? Some new thing that might actually be advantageous regardless if there was COVID or not. And also things like corrugated cardboard, things that were readily accessible. We also, because students didn't have the ability to like look over and see what someone was doing next to them, how they were using their tools. This thing stopped for some reason, I'm not sure. Whoop, I guess we're losing that one. Okay, there we go. It seems like it keeps stalling. Anyway, so we had students develop videos that helped the beginning design students understand how to use tools, how you might be able to like use other tools that may not be typical, but you'd be able to find in, say, rural communities. Looks like the video is not going to work, so I'm just going to keep moving. And then the other thing we did when we first broke, my studio that left midway or at the final project, we used Instagram as our platform for showing things, primarily because I don't think we were all totally comfortable with these new platforms that were being proposed. So using Instagram was something that everybody knew in the studio. In the summer, when we were teaching, the kind of beautiful thing about Instagram, again, you could get on a phone even if you had bad Wi-Fi. Typically, students were able to post images on Instagram. The pain in the ass of it was that Nolan and I were having to take all of the images that were submitted to us, and we were posting them onto Instagram, which was terribly laborious. And at some point, we realized this isn't going to work. So what we did was, instead of me owning that Instagram site, we gave it to everybody. So everybody had the exact same login. What we didn't realize at first, the nice thing was, so that was all set up. When we got to class, everything had been set up, every student's work had been put in there. What we didn't realize until that happened was that all of a sudden, everyone was anonymous. Like, it didn't say Bud did this, it didn't say Joe did this, it didn't say Jane did this. It was just completely anonymous. So we were able to evaluate the work on the merits of the work and not say, this is Bud's work and it's not looking good, right? But we'd really talk about the work itself. And then what we did is we allowed the students, since my laser pointer is not working, I'm going to come over here. We gave students emojis that said, this is like my favorite, this is my second favorite, this is my third favorite. So when we got together as a class, we would look at that and talk about the projects that the students wanted to talk about, which, again, anonymous. We're talking about the work itself and not talking about the students. And then one kind of last thing that was advantageous about this, not only were we talking about the work, but it allowed the students to take risks. So I might take risks and it would be okay to get it wrong because no one would really know that I did that. So people were able to take more risks. And then the video jumped on that one. Okay, so the other advantage that came out of this, so that was some of that graphic packaging. The video jumped pretty quick, so you didn't get to see it. But one of the other opportunities with this platform is that in Instagram, all of your images are stacked, right? They're all in a stack. So if we took that, and Nolan was the one that figured this out, but if you took that stack and you took it into Zoom, you could annotate over it. And as you annotated over the image that was given to the student, you could then go back through the stack to evaluate whether the compositions that they were creating, what was successful and what wasn't. So you'll just see a second here where we kind of go through that. So that also became a really advantageous part of using Instagram. The other thing is, the day before classes started in the summer, I invited everyone to go to a Mark Foster Gage lecture in LA. Obviously, we didn't all fly to LA, but because we could no longer get in spaces like this, all of a sudden, all the lectures were open to everybody. So anyone could take advantage of these things, which was also pretty exciting. We looked at materiality and movement through dance, like we would watch dance performances. Because DMake, they do the portfolios, going to second year, when we had to put together portfolios, I invited the 2020 ASID portfolio winner to join our studio. She was able to just zoom in, and so having someone that had really good experience give feedback on that. And then I'll just end with this slide. So the thing that what has come out of all of this that I think is really advantageous is thinking about the studio as something that is a collaborative. We were all working together. Like, in no ways none of those were just my ideas, none of them were just Nolan's ideas. It was like everybody's. The students were participating. So how can we think about studios? Sometimes they have to be prescribed, but how can we think about the studio as a collaborative place? And it reminds me a little bit of Brian Eno talks about the genius, genius is obviously one person and they're really smart, they're a genius. Genius is the power of everyone coming together and working together. And that's what I'd like to leave you guys with. Thank you.